Coach Jimmy Lynam likes about this team. You know, last week, PT, we talked about it. They had that game in Sacramento, and we talked about maybe they took that Kings team for granted. Let's see if they learned from it. And I think they did learn from that game last night, Coach, the way they were able to close out the game after struggling to close out that game in Sacramento. They played it a little differently. They took the timeout late where they didn't take it in Sacramento, and they got a nice win in L.A., Coach.
Yeah, they sure did, Mike. You know, this team is a young team. Obviously, they're going to improve in certain areas, and closing out games is, a big deal. And I think as you see the season progress, they'll do it better.
One of the things this team, they still, it seems like, have a ways to grow together. Can you kind of put into words what it's like to get new players as a coach and implement them in, and how you as a coach try to learn how you can work with them, having Ben and JJ, two guys you didn't have last year, and how long it takes a coach to kind of understand what he has?
Yeah, that's a great point. The one part, players meshing with one another on the court, but a coach, kind of knowing what to expect from your players, what different guys can do, like in end-of-game situations. And, to have a Ben Simmons as your point guard with a center like Embiid, that's almost like a dream. But, then to figure out the right situation to put them in late game settings so they can be most effective and cause the defense most problems. And I think really Brett Brown has done a really tremendous job in that. These two guys are very, very tough to handle late game.
They really are. Coach Jimmy Lynam is with us. NBC Sports Philadelphia Sixers pre and post game is a late night edition of the post game, early morning, if you will. Sixers beat the Clippers last night, and you said it last night, Coach, that Embiid, with these shooters around him, as this season goes on, and then Joel kind of gets himself, he said, I'm about 50%. I don't know if that's an accurate number, but if it is, that's scary to think of. But how much further can this offense develop as he gets in better shape?
Well, I would disagree with Joe respectfully. He's better than 50%, but I do agree he's not in, his best condition, like where he was last year in January, when he really first gave the indication of what a terror he really is. I'd say maybe he's 75% in shape. So somewhere, assuming last night he played his most minutes ever, just under 36 minutes, I'd say if he can stay on target by the new year after January 1, your expectation could be that he'd be close to, who he can be in terms of conditioning. And you're right. I would agree with your word. It's scary because he was so dominating last night. And it's not like he was playing against just an average player. DeAndre Jordan is one of the top defensive centers in this league. And I'm not being dramatic when I say he threw him around like a rag doll and fouled him out in 30 minutes.
Fouled him out and fouled his backup out, too. We're with Coach Jimmy Lynam. How about Rocco coach Robert Covington? He has to be one of the most underrated players in the league right now. What does he add to this team that you like?
Yeah, good for you, Mike, in making an on-target observation. He is one of the most underrated players, particularly because he's now, what got him into the league initially was his ability to shoot a ball. And you don't have to be a basketball expert. I just knew the name, but the first time I went down on the court and watched him shoot the ball, I was like, wow. I mean, how anybody could let this guy leave their building, because he had gotten cut by the Houston Rockets. And I didn't know how good a player he was, but it was evident you expected him to make every single shot. That's how pure his shooting stroke was. And what he did, they started working on trying to develop him as an all-around player. And I think that over 2 years, they were very successful doing that. But somehow, over that period, he forgot or lost sight of the fact what got him into the league in the first place, and his three-point shooting dropped off dramatically. Well, guess what? Somewhere it kicked back in, and he's back to where he was. This guy's one of the top three-point shooters in basketball, and all-around play has developed to the point, I think, that he's one of the top small forwards, and he's going to get paid accordingly, hopefully by the Sixers.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. Coach, it's Pete. How about Dario? How do they get him going, Dario Saric? And once they do that, you got to think that should make them even better, right?
Well, yes, but a little bit of a problem for me. And you can only have so many guys like who you feature as a coach, and you try to scheme accordingly. And the Sixers, I think, do a great job of kind of just playing what I call in the flow. They don't call a lot of, like, 4 downs and fists up. They don't walk the ball down. They play, kind of fast pace and what they like to call in space, meaning open the floor. We have a lot of guys who can penetrate. We have a monster scorer in Embiid down around the basket. And when the defenses start to try to guard that, they throw it out and they shoot 3. So Dario, he really is a kind of guy. He's a little like Simmons is the problem. And it's a good problem to have because actually the winning play last night, Dario Saric drives the baseline, the defense closes down, and he makes a diagonal pass all the way across the court, and who's standing there but Robert Covington for a horse shot 3. So Dario is a very, very skilled guy, but you're not going to feature him. I would call him an average, maybe a little better than that perimeter shooter. And that's going to put a little bit of a cap on, just how much he can score on this team.
Coach, you mentioned Ben Simmons there. Do you think the teams will start to adjust to him? I mean, he rarely shoots, or is he just good enough that it won't matter that he doesn't shoot?
I would say the latter. That good luck trying to scheme, because this guy, he is a combination. If you look at him physically, number one, he's every bit of 6'10". Now, picture, and it's not like people haven't seen a 6'10" person or player, but picture 6'10", grabbing a rebound and flying up the court, put it through his legs at half court, and then throwing like a no-look Larry Bird pass when he gets to the top of the key. I mean, this guy is a handful. And what he does, it's a phrase that I like to use, like when there's space, you're guarding somebody and you lay way back off him because he's a lot faster than you. Well, what the real guys do, they gobble the space, and that's what Simmons does. You can lay back, you can guard, you can fall back on Broad Street. Guess what? It doesn't matter because this guy just drops his head and he runs at you, gobbling that space. And when he gets even with you, he's like a freight train. He's moving at about 100 miles an hour. He's impossible to keep in front of you.
Coach Jimmy Lynam, NBC Sports Philadelphia Sixers pre- and post-game. Coach, and with that, there was a lot of people who, questioned maybe his tenacity or his desire coming into the league. He didn't get the team to the NCAA tournament and this and that, but he even comes to bring it on the defensive end of the court, it seems like.
Wow, yeah. You know what? You're right on with that one. And I'm going to give Brett Brown some credit. Obviously, he had a relationship with not just Simmons, but the family. And Simmons, I only know him casually, but from what they tell me, I mean, he aspires to be one of the best. I'm talking best. And as a result, Brett, I think, sold him on the defensive part of this, be a two-way player. And that wingspan of his and his quickness and athleticism, I mean, he gets out. It kind of dawned on me last night, and I actually said to Marshall Harris, who I was watching the game with, that I said, I'm going to drop this one on Brett Brown, that this guy's got a potential defensively to be Andre Iguodala-like. And you don't have to count this. Andre Iguodala, over the years he's been in the league, he got more hands on more balls than all the rest of them put together. He was like cat-like quick doing things like that. And I see that now developing in Simmons.
Hey, Coach, you coached in the NBA and obviously know what it's like to go on these West Coast road trips, but the Sixers have been on the road a lot for this young team. To be 7-6 and win, 4 or 5 games on the road already, what does that tell you about this team?
Well, it tells me how good potential this team is and assuming that they continue to develop, how good they're going to be come the spring of this year. That the road, you're right, it's particularly these extended trips, they're very, very difficult. But this team has a lot of weapons, and also they're playing without Markelle Fultz. And the last 3, they haven't had Jared Bayless, who's one of their top 3-point shooters. But one of the things I loved about this team in the beginning, I thought they had more depth than anybody, and I say that, anybody in the NBA. You have to give the Sixer Brain Trust credit in the way they've developed this group around these star players. So they're going to get nothing but better as the season progresses.
So, Jimmy, I've heard you say that they could be a top 4 seed in the East. What's the ceiling for this team in the East? How high can they go?
Well, I'm going to stick with that. I feel confident in that, and I think this road trip was a defining, if I'm on target, a defining piece in heading in that direction. Now they come home. I think they play the Lakers tomorrow night to end the trip, and they'll probably be favored in that game. Not that automatically means you'll win the game, and that'll be a great matchup. The Ball versus Ben Simmons. A lot of people would really look forward to seeing that. It's a shame it's such a late game. But then they come home and play 6 straight home games. So they have a chance, to all of a sudden kind of position themselves, up into that top 4 if they can take care of business. And I like to say, look at 20 games. When you're one quarter into the schedule, you then have a pretty good feel of who your team can be if they sustain what they've accomplished through that first quarter of the season.
Game 14 tomorrow night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coach Jimmy Lynam, NBC Sports Philadelphia. They'll have the night off tomorrow. The Sixers are on ESPN against the Lakers. But then, as he said, 7 straight at home, starting with Golden State on Saturday. Coach, it was a pleasure catching up.
My pleasure talking to you guys. We'll do it again.